Trying to keep your mind in that blissed out holiday mode, these words are probably creeping around in the back of your mind. Uniforms, textbooks, lunch boxes. And if this is the first time you're sending a little person off to school, I imagine there's quite a bit of angst with deciding where to go, which school will fit the best. And for families with children with a disability, it might be tricky to work out how to navigate those questions. David Roy is a lecturer in disability and education at the University of Newcastle and joins me now. Hi, David.
Good afternoon, Rebecca.
For parents of children with a disability, what's the most important aspect to start with when looking for a local school?
Well, the first thing is go to your local school. It's no different to any other family. You go down to your local department school and you register to enrol your child. It's once you do that and you get the form through that you then see that part of it says, is there anything particular we need to know about your child? As is to be noted for any children. And that's when sometimes it can either become a wonderfully supportive experience or in minority of cases, but significant minority of cases, can become more of a barrier in the experience, depending on whether the school immediately just goes, fine, not an issue, we'll help support that, or a school goes, that will be a problem for us.
And the evidence tells us that mainstream schools are beneficial for all students. What kind of questions can parents ask to gauge whether a school actually fits their child?
Well, every school should fit a child. I know it seems quite simplistic because in the article that myself and Dr. David Armstrong from RMIT wrote, we did write that there are some schools that might be a better fit. And that's because, sadly, we still have schools with an attitude that kind of go, we don't want to have that type of child, which would not be acceptable if a child was Indigenous or from a religious or ethnic minority or of a different gender with this particular case. But for disabilities, some attitudes still remain, and that's what needs to what we need to change as a society. So for families entering, they'll go, right, we want to enter here, and the school should be a good fit, and the school then needs to say, well, what do we need to adapt to give your child the best opportunities to show all that they can do in the education experience. And there will be times when that won't be an issue. There will be times when schools have to make minor adjustments. There will be some schools that have to make major adjustments. And there will be some schools that will say, perhaps you should be going to a school for special education. And as you said, well, the data internationally tells us that mainstream is actually the best option if possible.
That's right. And if there are some red flags from a school when you go to visit looking for a placement for your child, what could those red flags be where they're not the most supportive school?
I think the first thing is the welcoming smile. You often feel the attitude of a school as you walk in. Are the kids happy? Do the staff feel happy, or are they feeling harassed? And then you walk in and it's the reaction that happens when your child, who's often with you, is looked at. Is it surprise? Is it openness and friendliness? So again, it's that welcoming attitude that I know all schools want to work on.
Yes.
But if there is sometimes an attitudinal problem coming from the top in that school, then that's a problem.
We're just going to pause for a moment, David, whilst we actually welcome some listeners to our program from other states. So we'll just pause momentarily for that as they come and join us on ABC Radio. This is Rebecca de Unamuno on ABC Radio. You are listening to ABC Radio. I'm chatting with David Roy, who is a lecturer in disability and education at the University of Newcastle. We're talking about what to look for in schools if your child happens to have a disability and they're attending school for the very first time. Sorry to interrupt you there, David, but the red flags we were talking about, the greeting from a school is so incredibly important, isn't it? And is it important to take your child with you to see if they respond well?
I personally think that's a great thing. It's not always practical, depending on the family situation. Some families prefer just to go themselves to look and then bring the child. So I guess it all determines on how you know your child and what your child wants as well. Because the parents, particularly if you're starting school at that early ages of 5, the parent is kind of the expert on the child at that point. And so they know what their child reacts, what they feel comfortable. For some parents, it's better to maybe not and just get a feel for a school for themselves. But the key thing is, the ideal is for you to go to your local school, and we want all our local schools to be the best.
Yes.
That said, we have to also remember that independent and Catholic schools also do accept children with a disability. So those are options for people, but you are guaranteed that you will get a place in your public school. It should be your local school, but the legislation as such is that it's more that you are guaranteed that you will be educated, your child, not they'll necessarily be in the local school. And that maybe needs to change, but we'll see.
Exactly. And for children who are changing schools, say they've already been in the school system before, and perhaps they're having to start a new school, they've moved, what are the ingredients for a strong, healthy relationship between teachers, your child, and parents?
Oh, the most important, as it is with all relationships, as we're doing just now, is talking. And being honest and open and upfront. If you feel that there's an issue, whether it's from the teacher's perspective or the parents, talk it through. Talk with the child. Let's keep the children in the conversation as well if they're able to communicate in whatever form. And also to try to make connections with the previous school if the family found that they were supported within that school. If they weren't supported, it's often good to make a clean break, and that's sometimes one of the reasons that families move. And the other option they often have is they move to homeschooling, which is a completely different issue entirely. But it's about being open, realising that there's going to be challenges in all relationships. There's also going to be assets you bring to them, and find that common ground, because really everyone's goal is to have a happy and contented and developing educationally and emotionally child within the classroom.
And I understand, David, that you have personal experience in this area.
Oh, well, yes and no. I actually have dyspraxia, which I know is something you were talking about.
We were on yesterday's programme, yes.
Yesterday, I was finding that quite interesting to listen to. I'm older, and in my day, they weren't actually officially diagnosing, and it was only as an adult I was then diagnosed that, yep, you've had dyspraxia, and we can see where this was. For me, that meant I had some coordination challenges within fine and gross motor skills. Other kids with dyspraxia, it can be in communication, and in talking, they actually don't talk. It doesn't intellectually disable you in that sense, and that's something that's so important for so many people to realise. A child with a disability does not mean they have an intellectual disability.
Yes, exactly.
And some of the brightest people in our world have got disabilities, and it's through having that disability that they develop their assets. So whether you look at people like Richard Branson, Samuel L. Jackson, Daniel Radcliffe, David Bailey, the photographer, Emily Blunt, currently in Mary Poppins, all have different forms of disabilities. So mine was dyspraxia, and it meant that PE was a real challenge for me, as was handwriting. I was always last to be picked. And the competitive nature of that subject in those days, in the 70s and into the 80s, was not beneficial to me. But I found that with being engaged in the arts, with music and with drama, I could actually have to focus on my physical coordination to do drama, but in a non-competitive way, which allowed me to develop it, which is actually the world I ended up going into. So
isn't it amazing? Yeah.
There's an irony that often you find children with disability will move into those areas where they maybe initially have challenges because they're determined to overcome them and become experts and masters within it, if that makes sense.
It certainly does. Well, some excellent tips there, David, for parents who are in that exact situation, looking for, a school that will be best for their children. Thank you so much for joining us on ABC Radio.
A pleasure.
Thank
Have a great
you.
afternoon.
You too. Bye-bye. And just a text